Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vine Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vine Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life. We each have the capability to tap into intuition, to tap into some gifts and understandings that we just might not believe in or we just might not understand. And some of us are able to tap into those gifts at such a high level that we're able to bring to the world opportunities for others to learn more about themselves, to get a clearer view of who they are, to tap into the answers inside of them or the answers that are surrounding them in the energy field that they are as a higher being, as a soul and a physical being here on the 3D earth. One of the most interesting things for me is that much of the gifts that we have in this aspect are shut down so early in our childhood because it seems abnormal, or our parents or our grandparents or even our teachers will think there's something wrong with us, or worry about the rest of the world thinking there's something wrong with us. Today's guest mother supported her in her clairvoyance and her ability to really tap into how other people were feeling and to tap into the energy that was surrounding them. And she's taken that gift to a whole new level, to be able to help individuals, to be able to help groups and businesses really bring the true and strong essence of them to the world and to their jobs and to their families. I want you to think about, as we go into today's podcast, where you've seen evidence of you having a clairvoyance or a clairaudience or even a clairsentience, where it's a special gift and it really taps you into the energy that you are, but more importantly, it taps you into the energy of the universe. So let's listen to today's guest and really get a feeling for how she learned about her gift and how she's bringing it to the world. I'm with Katy Bray today, and Katy is a professional clairvoyant and gifted empath whose direct and loving approach has been game-changing for those seeking to achieve the next level of success with greater confidence and authenticity. As a psychic, she is exceptionally well-versed in transformative techniques for accessing information and fast-forwarding growth, and has created her own style that is uniquely adept at helping individuals gain access to what slows down their manifestation process and beginning fully in their power. Katy Bray, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
I am so ready.
Excellent. As we were talking before we got started here, I've done a lot of research into you and what you're doing. And I'd like you to share a little bit more of how you're bringing your special gifts to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have worked with over 12,000 people in my professional career. So that's not including prior to actually going, I really think I'm supposed to do this. When I was hiding out a little bit still, I think. I have been able to see a lot of patterns. And so when I started putting together these patterns of humanity, of what our souls do, and I started to see what I now call energy architecture. So it's basically the constructs of how we are woven together energetically. Some people might say it's the grid around us. I see it as downloaded from our soul contract, which comes from one of our higher chakras. And it basically creates all the different ways that we show up to the world, the lines of energy where we send ourselves consciously and unconsciously. And I help people work through that. So I think most people can relate to, gosh, I spent all this time working on this, or I spent all this time working on that. And I really thought that I had it. And cognitively, I really understand this. So I don't know why I keep running into this situation. And what I say is 99% of the time, it's because there's this vibrational imprint that comes in the way of, they literally look like wires that come out of us that will sort of hook us to our past, hook us to other people. It's different than energy cords. So I go there and with people, I partner with people, and we actually follow those energy lines and bring them back in so that people are then able to be in present time. There's a lot of talk about being in present time or being in the now, and that's actually really challenging for certain people, where a lot of their energy is actually sending input to all these different dimensions and all these different spans of time. So I help people collect those and bring them back in so they can literally feel whole again.
You do that work not just with individuals, but you do it in businesses also. Is that true?
So in our businesses, my husband and I, we actually, my background is Ayurveda. So I'm a Vedic master, and gosh, it's its own show what that is, but it is an ancient medical system. It predated Chinese medicine, but Chinese medicine is similar, and it's something more people are familiar with. We actually take in a behavioral and psychological model of that into businesses. And so, yes, I do a lot of that work with companies, but we have this Ayurvedically based system. Say that 5 times as fast as you can. Oh my gosh. And so we work on a very personal and energetic level with them as well.
Oh, awesome. There's some amazing work that you're doing. I want to take this podcast a little bit different direction than I do most, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
Could you, one of the things that this podcast is all about, and what I want to help the imagination see, is that we all have these special gifts, and sometimes these gifts are something that are scary to us, or something that is not really accepted in the mainstream of especially the U.S., but as the world as a whole. Could you share a little bit about your experience of learning you were a clairvoyant and about your psychic abilities?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my first precognition, I was 3 years old, and I was in my backyard in my little turtle pool. It was summertime, and I was swimming around, and my mom said, "Kate, I'm going to go inside with Daddy Bob," that was my stepdad, "and we're going to just talk for a few." That's all she said. And I immediately said, "Oh, this is the part where they put all the kids together and tell us they're getting a divorce." And within the hour, sure enough, my sister and my stepbrothers and I are sitting around the table, and they're announcing they're getting a divorce. And so I knew at that moment, I was the only person who knew that ahead of time. And even then it was like, that's interesting. Which is funny to me that I observed that as being interesting, right? Like a lot of people just feel it as normal when they're that age. And for me, I had some kind of idea that I was the only person who knew that was coming. So skip to when I was a little bit older. I was about 8, 9 years old when I started seeing angels. I was doing dishes and I felt something looking at me. And I remember looking to my left, and there was this gorgeous angel just staring at me, almost admiring me with just such love. I mean, it was the most exquisite feeling. And so I started seeing angels from that time on. And then I started seeing the deceased. I always joke that I was the 3rd grader in the life after death section at the library. I was like the only young one there, but I was like, I have to make sense of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then it was about the age of 10, I said to my mom, my poor mom was driving at the time, bless her for being so patient with me and not crashing the car. But I said, "Mommy, why does it feel like I can step into people's bodies and I know exactly what they're feeling and I know what they're thinking?" And so I was blessed that my mom never tried to shut me down. She never knew what to do with me. She didn't really have the answers, but she was always very much on her own spiritual path, and she continues to be today. And so So I feel really blessed that she so welcomed these things in me. And when I first told her I was seeing angels, she just wanted to hear more because it filled her up with so much hope and love that she just wanted to keep hearing the stories. So I was really encouraged to talk about it and honor it, which I feel really blessed about.
It's interesting. I know the feeling that you're talking about, the love that comes through is so powerful, and you just feel like there's millions of little arms wrapped around you
Yes.
and keeping you safe and comfortable. You said that you didn't tell your mom till a little bit later in life. Did you share your gift with people along the way?
I didn't really. That's where I did feel a little bit nervous because I knew my friends weren't seeing what I was seeing. I also knew that I was hypersensitive and I would often have like that nervous bellyache. I would often start to feel what my friends were feeling. And in a lot of ways, I think I questioned and judged myself a little bit. And I will never forget, I was in high school and I was actually seeing a therapist at the time. And she told me, she said, it really just sounds like you're taking on what everybody else around you is saying they feel. She wasn't saying it in an honoring and empathic way. She was saying it in a way that was very derogatory, like I was trying to fit in somehow. And so I
Mhm.
was making what they were saying my own. And I remember being deeply affected by that. I was probably about 15 years old. And I remember that being a really pivotal time for me and like questioning myself, like, oh my gosh, is that actually true? And I just never realized it. So I was quite shy about it and not very outspoken about it until many years later. Although it's a place my mom and I have always been able to meet, it took me time to really share it with more people.
Mhm. In my story, I was the typical young man that my empathy was schooled out of me pretty much. And
Yeah.
I learned very well what it was meant to be a man in the current society,
Mm,
and was taught to fit in that mold pretty well,
yeah.
with always some kind of ache. So at that point, then, did you feel like you were separate from other people? Not empathetically, but from the conscious or the mental aspect of things. Did you feel separate?
I did in some ways. And actually, that's why I believe I started medicating with alcohol at a younger age because it actually caused me to not feel so much. And it's what allowed me to feel like I was just a normal teenager. Even though that was obviously very unhealthy behavior, it was where I learned to go. And that was like the great normalizer for me. Unfortunately, it ended up being a pretty brutal path. I have 21 years sober now, but it was not a good path. It was a blessed path. It's certainly one I look back on and in total reverence and honor at this point. But going through it was pretty tough.
One of the things that I love to share with people is that everything, and listening to some of your podcasts that you and Zeb have done,
Mhm.
and just understanding where you're coming from. I know you feel very much this way too. That that bout with alcoholism, your addiction,
Mhm.
what gifts did you find in that after the fact?
Mhm. So many gifts. I think I really started to learn about self honesty and accountability for how I show up and what I put into the world. It really tested my spiritual endurance and stamina. And it also gave me an immense amount of compassion without having to take on and learning that nuance, especially working with people the way that I do. I feel like that's still really prevalent for me that I can be with people without actually having to take anything from them. And I feel very strongly that my bout with alcoholism and my recovery from that had so much to do with it. I mean, I was sponsoring so many women, and I would go into jails, some really, really tough places. And I would sit and talk with the women there who were incarcerated for drug and alcohol related crimes, or they were under the influence, right? And they would murder or abuse, or some really heinous stories. But I was really able to be present with them because I just really understand what happens to us as spiritual beings, being in these human forms, and how confronting that is. And I really understand why we seek other things, so that we don't have to experience our gifts and who we are in our fullness. So I really think that the gifts of that have been endless, and they continue to reveal themselves to me every day. But I would say those are probably the key ones.
Oh, that's pretty heartfelt and pretty. It really touches me too. We have our youngest son went through an addiction issue, and 6 full years of in and out of rehabs, and
So
the
hard.
lessons that he is starting to share with us. He's been sober for a little over a year. I can't wait to get
Oh,
his 21-year chip.
congratulations. That's amazing.
Yes. But what he's sharing with us, and that the gifts that he has learned over the last 6 years is very powerful. And it's also very motivating for us in his support, because we had to back off, as you know, and allow him to live the life that he wanted to live in that moment, to experience what he was here to experience. And now that he is, moving to the next leg of his journey, it's pretty exciting for us to be able to share the gifts that he's learned, and how he can bring that to the world. So it's spectacular.
I love that.
Let me ask you, would you consider that the big wake-up call in your life, or was there something else that came along?
So yes and no. My struggle with alcohol and marijuana really took a turn. There was an 18-month period in my life and I was still in high school. So I was sexually assaulted in Europe by a stranger. And then one of my lifelong friends was killed in a car accident. And then both of my grandparents died. And I was really close to my grandparents. And that was in a very short period of time. And I always say, even the healthiest person, that's going to be a really hard time in someone's life. That was a lot of loss for me.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone who didn't have the skills and who felt so deeply and only knew to use alcohol to cope, I really just ran towards it. And with my post-traumatic stress disorder, and part of that was agoraphobia. So I stayed in bed for 2 years. I was really afraid to leave the house. I dropped out of college. I gained a ton of weight. I weighed well over 250 pounds. I'm only 5'4". So I'm not a slight woman, but I'm not a large woman. So I was really in full on meltdown at that point. And what's funny is my lifelong best friend and her brother and their father had been invited to my parents' house for dinner. We were all close. And it was the one time that I was like, okay, maybe I can leave the house. Maybe I can just go to my parents' house and have dinner and come home. It was a really big deal for me. And so we're sitting at dinner, and my friend and her brother, they were actually the first two people I ever got drunk with. The older brother starts talking about how he had 4 months sober. Now, my parents, it was my stepfather and my mother, they met in AA, so they had many years at this point. So my friend's older brother was talking about how amazing life was and how he's realizing all this stuff. And I didn't know if I wanted to throw up, cry, scream, laugh, hide. It was just this cacophony of emotion inside of me. And I went home that night, and I was really sitting with that. And I heard this voice say, "You got yourself into this. You get yourself out of this." And it was literally from that moment on where there was such a presence in that message that something like literally shifted inside of me. It was just alchemy. It was this instantaneous alchemy where I was changed. And I've yet to ever pick up anything since. The next day, I told my mom, I got to an AA meeting, I found a sponsor, I started seeing a therapist, and the rest is history. So I really feel like that was just a very sacred part of my journey. And the wake up call came because I spent 2 years just very isolated in a bottom. And, there were just these angelic presences and people that I trusted because I'd known them my whole life. I mean, that was so divinely orchestrated. It still just brings me to tears.
Well, kind of an intervention with the angels and
Yeah.
your earthly angels also.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, very, very amazing. What how did that move you into being willing to share yourself with the world more?
So I spent a lot of time in therapy, which I'm a big fan of. And yet I got to a point after spending enough time in there that I just kept hearing, there's more to you than this. There's more to you than this. And so I started seeing this intuitive healer that my mom had been seeing on a regular basis. And so I would see her once a month and she would do energy healing work on me. And it was like she was sloughing off the residue in me that was still holding back. And I just felt like there was nothing else I could do at that point. It was one of those where I could do other things and be good at them, but I always felt unsettled. I knew that I was being called and compelled. And so at first I was using much softer words to describe what I do. I went into Ayurveda. That was very serendipitous, but that felt like, okay, but this is still grounded and still practical. And I, got my certification in life coaching because I didn't honestly really want to be that person who just did readings all the time. I mean, I understand why we have those and they have their time and place. And it's not that I don't do them. But I always felt so deeply called to use my skills to help people move into their own intuition more and to really empower them with who they can be and who they're supposed to be. So the more of the feedback that I was getting that this was what people needed and what people wanted, the more courage I think I got to be able to really speak it out loud until, now it's, you can take me or leave me. I'm totally at peace with that because I know that I believe wholly that we are all here to do the work that we're here to do. And some people's work is to just not get the kind of work that I do. It's just not part of their life sphere. And I'm so at peace with that. It's not my job to make it. It's just not for them. And I learned to not make that a personal thing when I stopped judging myself for feeling weird and understood that it's a skill set that I can actually use to support a lot of people in a very unique way.
A perfect segue to my next question.
Mhm.
The company that Mary and I, my wife, have is called Imagine Miracles. And the
Mm.
definition that we have of miracle is through an act of love, sharing your gifts and talents in a
Mm.
way that others can share theirs.
Yes.
Tell us
Perfect.
tell us about the miracle of you and some of the things that you've brought to help people and some examples of how these people are sharing their gifts and talents.
So, gosh, there's quite a few examples. One is one of my favorites because it's a woman who's near and dear to my heart. She was probably I think the first person to babysit me when I was a teeny tiny little baby. And we stayed in touch. She's friends with a family, not real close. And some years ago, she contacted me and she said, I really need your help. I just left an abusive marriage. I'm on food stamps. I have 3 kids. I don't know what to do. She was really at a very hard place. And not everybody's at a hard place like that when they come to see me, but she was really in it. And I mean, we all know the saying, you can lead a horse to water, right? I mean, I can only do so much for people. I know you understand that, right? It's like we're all our own healers and we're all our own gurus. We're just finding who has resonance, who can really mirror that back to us and walk with us in that path. And it happened to be the perfect time for her to really listen to what was coming through to her. I rarely give my opinion. I always give the information that's given to me, and I don't interject. And if I ever do, I say, this is my opinion, so you take it with a grain of salt, because that's different. So long story short, her heart's desire, her greatest desire, was to be working with babies. She loved babies, and she really wanted to be a doula. And what we saw for her was not just her being a doula and a midwife, but actually creating a network of doulas and midwives. So she wasn't running ragged, but that she actually had an agency.
Mm.
She's actually grown that today. She has 5 other doulas and midwives that work for her. She's one of the most popular midwife doula places around in her part of the country. And that was all because she was at that place and she just needed someone to help pull it out and see more of what was available to her than what she would have ever thought of. And so she's now taking care of babies and parents in ways that they can never dream of being cared for at a time like that. When you have a new baby, that's a tough time. And she is such a beautiful person to be there with them.
You know, I want to share with everybody that what Katy just shared with us is so important to understand, because each of us came into this world with a divine intent or a mission that is well beyond what we can even imagine is out there for us. And when you can find someone to help you find your answers, because they can't give you the answer, they can help you find your answers. And like Katy, they're setting the example for what you can do and what you can be if you allow yourself to find yourself. I really want that to sink into everybody, because it's this lady who is truly making a difference in young babies' worlds. And let's face it, the children that are coming into the world right now at such a high energy level need that support from people like this. So you know, find yourself, find what you're here for, and find the people to help you not only learn about yourself and find your own answers, but to also support you in that journey. So I love what you just said. It was so right on point to share.
And if I can add something too, that, you know, I recently had a session with someone who, she wasn't quite as down and out, but she's questioning some things and she knows what she's been doing isn't really working for her anymore. And I got a larger vision for her of what I see as in her realm of possibility, like it's in her energy field. And she was really scared. It really scared her. And she said, you know, I really am going to have to sit with this. And it took her a good week to actually sit with it and let it marinate, because it was she knew it felt like, that's me. I get that. And yet, oh my gosh, that's me. And so while we're saying what we're saying, I think it's equally important to acknowledge that it's not necessarily all bunnies and rainbows, that when you say yes, you're going to be confronted. And the things that really are keeping you limited and small are going to start to fall away. It's not always a pretty process, but that's part of the process. It's like any kind of birthing process. It's not pretty, neat, linear. It's none of that. But to allow yourself to be present to that fear, rather than thinking that fear is an indicator that you're moving in the wrong direction, I think is really, really important.
It's this might be a strange analogy, but the placenta that we've been wrapped in, that's been protecting us and nourishing us and giving us the opportunity to learn about our gifts and talents, does have to slough away for us to be out there in front of everyone. So
it's a great analogy, because then it's like, yes, we do have to trust the world to take care of us, to nourish us, to teach us. Life will teach us if we let it. So yeah, I think that's a brilliant analogy.
So instead of going into the lightning round questions, I want to ask you, for somebody who is an empath, especially some younger people or older people too, that they definitely know they're an empath, or they don't quite understand why they're feeling everybody else, or they are clairvoyant and know what's
Mhm.
out there in front of them. Could you give some advice on
Mhm.
feeling or
Yeah.
understanding that it is normal, it is part of your gift,
Mhm.
and to how to love that and
Yeah.
not feel like you're different?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. Well, I'll say for anyone who hasn't read Dr. Judith Orloff's work, she has the Empath Survival Guide, she has the Ecstasy of Surrender, she has Emotional Freedom. She is a psychiatrist, a practicing psychiatrist who is also a psychic and an empath. And she's done extraordinary work on how do you work with this and how to be with this. So I would definitely suggest running to her work. She also has a Facebook page for empaths. It's a group that you can join if you just look it up. So with that said, I find that breath work is one of the most imperative things to practice on a regular basis, because it's not only grounding, it does help bring your energy into present time, but it also strengthens your nervous system and your auric field. One of the things that happens to empaths so often is that our auric field and our nervous system become very spongy and become they absorb so much that way. And so when you use your breath, you actually start to fill your energy field with new chi, new prana, and you actually make yourself stronger so that you're able to feel, but you're more able to feel with discernment and not get sucked into everything. Also, any grounding technique that's possible, really, really valuable. And in terms of normalizing it, I would sit down and write all of the ways that people look to you, because you're probably the person that people want to talk to when something happens. You're that loyal friend. You're that person that people look to because you make them feel so good. I don't mean this in a codependent kind of way, but it is to say that we support people in a way that others don't have access to. And I think that that is one of our greatest superpowers. We do need to learn how to manage it as a gift because we can still be that person. But think about the way that you connect with people. When someone's really hurting, you're so there with them. And sometimes that's what we need. We need to be that witness, or we need to feel witnessed. Empaths are the best witnesses for people's experiences. And I don't know of too many greater gifts than that.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that also. One of the things that you've said on a couple of the podcasts that I've listened to that you've done, you talked about being aware, having psychic abilities, being clairvoyant, to really be aware that some of the information that you pick up is what's being held in the energy field of the individual, especially things like their fears or their desires
Mhm.
can really lead, let's just say, a psychic reading
Mhm.
astray because of the
Yes.
energy that the individual is holding. Could you share just a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because it is a soapbox that I can get on. So I will keep this as short and sweet as possible. Um, yes. So, one of the things, especially if you're someone who is looking for some kind of clairvoyant or psychic to work with, or someone with intuitive skills, it's really important to sort of test the quality. By referrals are always, I think, a really great way to go, but to have a sense of how much work they've done on themselves, because part of the work that we do on ourselves is part of what gives us a certain degree of discernment. I can't tell you how many people have come to work with me because they need to unravel a seed that was planted from another psychic who was reading their fear or projecting some of their own stuff on that person. And so I mean, for me, I see a fear as being a very different, it feels and looks like a very different energy than something that's actually in their soul contract. So that's why I go right to the soul contract, because it's so pure and clear. There's really not a lot of room for, messing that up. But that's a really important distinction, that if you find, especially because a lot of people will go to a psychic for a reading if they're feeling anxious and they don't want to feel anxious anymore, they're feeling afraid and they don't want to feel afraid anymore, and then that psychic will just tell them what they fear. If you find yourself in that situation, I would do your homework on who actually resonates in a clearer way. And I really feel like you can trust your body on that one. You can trust your own intuition on that one.
That's great advice. Trust in yourself, and even through readings or channelings or anything else that you receive, does it feel right for you?
Mm-hmm.
Go with the feeling test, because if you don't, you could be following paths that truly aren't in alignment with who you are and your direction in life.
Yeah, and only you actually know that at the end of the day.
Right. Right. Thank you very much. Could you tell the audience how they can get in touch with you, learn more about the energy architecture,
Sure.
learn more about what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, so my website is called livewiththelightson.com. It's all spelled out. I also have a Facebook page, livewiththelightson.com. I'm pretty easy to find. And I'm always available on social media. The website describes a little bit about what a session is like with me. There's a lot of energy work that happens in the conversation. It explains what that looks like. I have my Live with the Lights On show that goes live on Facebook on Mondays, and I have my multidimensional living show that's live on Fridays. There also can be found on iTunes and all those good places. So I'm easy to find.
Excellent. I'll make sure that all that information shows up on the show page for everyone. We'll also make sure that Dr. Orloff's books are
Yes.
listed there for people,
Yes.
so they can learn a little bit more from her and the aspects that she brings into what you're sharing with the world. And it's such an amazing gift that you're bringing, and the willingness to bring it in the way that you are, I appreciate, and I know so many more appreciate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
You bet. On behalf of Mary, my wife and partner, and the entire imagination, have a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 Mind Awakening Steps Toward Your Unique Purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.